And thank you, Butte County, for sharing it with other counties that are impacted by fire. We'll be following your lead and figuring out a way to stretch these resources and get them to as many communities as we can while we're waiting for new donations to come in to the GoFundMe page. Thank you, Superintendent Sakuma. Thank you, Superintendent Nemko. You both ushered me into my new role here as superintendent almost 2 years ago. And we've been able to have conversations about the importance of digital learning, about the importance of supporting our educators and our families. It hasn't all been just about disaster response, but we certainly have had more than our fair share. What I appreciate about both of you is that you recognize that while the pandemic impacts so many things, including the funding that we normally get to support many of these programs, because of the pandemic, it doesn't mean that we can stop talking about closing the achievement gap. We can't stop talking about serving English learners. We can't stop talking about making sure our students are prepared for the jobs of tomorrow, and that computer science and STEAM and opportunities to learn digital learning. And so thank you both for being such great leaders. And then I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Nemko, who would like to have another word.
I just wanted to thank you. I think about the responsibilities that you have for the whole state. And while we're enduring fires in our county, everybody else is still in the middle of a pandemic. And yet you have been so responsive. I have sent many frantic texts, need help, and gotten a text back from you within 10 minutes, from Mary Nicely as well. The whole CDE staff has been pretty amazing. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. We are very grateful.
Thank you. We are all connected, and we have to get through this together, and we will. And so I'm grateful for everyone. I'm grateful for those who are helping us with ASL interpretation today so that we may reach others. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that today I'm coming to you from the California School for the Deaf in Riverside. That the Department of Education is fortunate to have 2 schools that serve deaf students, one in Riverside and one in Fremont, where I hope to be next week. And we also have a school for the blind in Fremont. And that our educators are doing great things for our students across the state. They too, and we too, are struggling with trying to figure out how to safely reopen as we manage those 3 schools directly. And those schools bring families from dozens of counties across the state, and so that we know many of our families are impacted. We appreciate you both. Please stay tuned. Likely to have some questions for you from the media. Jessica, are you able to say a word about how folks who want to donate and get involved can support the Emergency Response Fund?
Absolutely. Thank you, Superintendent. A GoFundMe page has been created for the CDE Emergency Response Fund. There's a link in the chat here. There will be a link also in the comments area. We really encourage all of you to take a visit and appreciate anything you can contribute. As our superintendents noted, there's so many different costs, often hidden, that happen in evacuation circumstances. When you are under duress and you're being displaced, sometimes grabbing that hotspot or that laptop isn't quite the top thing on your mind. And we want to step in and make sure that that also doesn't mean you don't get to be in school. School provides so much stability and connection, and helping us with that GoFundMe fund will help us respond much more effectively, much more nimbly. As you've heard, the superintendent and his team at CDE have been lightning fast in their response. The county offices have been incredible in mobilizing right away, and we just need your help so we can do that for anyone in need.
Thank you. At this time, Mr. Thigpen, if there are any questions from the media, we'd be happy to go to that now.
Absolutely. Thank you. And just one more plug for the CDE Emergency Response Fund. Some other places that you'll be able to find that will be on our California Department of Education Facebook page, Twitter account, Instagram, and on our website at cde.ca.gov later today. And if through all those platforms you're still unable to find it, send an email to emergencyservices@cde.ca.gov. That's emergency services at cde.ca.gov. A lot of letters. Our first question is from Ricardo Cano at Cal Matters. And he asks, How would you advise the state's educators approach grading this school year for students who may lack technology or reliable internet access to engage in online learning?
Thanks for the question. It is clearly a daunting, set of circumstances. And as we approach the testing period, pretty soon, many questions about how we're going to do this for students who do not have adequate computing devices and connectivity. Yesterday, I spent time with the legislature talking about the need to upgrade our infrastructure to make sure that we have connectivity that can flow like electricity all across our state, recognizing that many of our rural communities don't have access to that infrastructure. Even many of our urban and suburban communities and our frontier communities are without the resources that they need. Recognizing that there is a shortage of computing devices and hotspots right now. There's a worldwide run on supply. Again, acknowledging the work of Mary Nicely and others in our office who have worked with manufacturers to literally get manufacturers to make hundreds of thousands of devices available for purchase from our school districts, our partners at Apple and T-Mobile, who've made an internet-enabled device available at a reduced cost, recognizing that there are no hotspots in many cases. So for those districts who need help, just know that we continue to source equipment and we continue to tackle this question about what's going to happen around testing. Mr. Thigpen and Mr. Canio, I would just say that I'm encouraged by those school districts that are beginning to think differently about how grading should happen. There's no one size fits all, but we think that this is a worthy consideration. These school districts are approaching this from an equity standpoint, and they're saying that from an equity lens, many of our students will be set back and may experience learning gaps and loss. And I think it's worthy of looking at these issues. By the way, if you think about some of the districts that are talking about changing the grading policies, they're not just talking about it in response to COVID. They're talking about it in response to disparities that have existed that have resulted in a discrepancy sometimes in the experience of students of color and students from low-income backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds, and looking for a way to create more of a restorative approach rather than a punishing approach. And I think this is a welcome conversation. Obviously, it's early on, but we intend at CDE to engage in a robust conversation with superintendents like Dr. Nemko and Superintendent Sakuma and others all across the state about what are the best ways to measure learning now during the pandemic and going forward. How do we get the best out of our students without any punishment for our students, and recognizing that our students all come from different backgrounds and have different circumstances that need to be considered.
Thank you, Superintendent. We received a few questions from Howard Bloom at the Los Angeles Times, also about school reopening. I'm going to ask them, they're generally related here, but he wants to know, what is your message to parents who feel schools should be reopening? And what's your message to parents who maybe are worried that it's too risky to open schools, but also worry about the effectiveness of distance learning? Have we learned anything about the relative risks of reopening schools based on the experience so far?
Thanks for the question, Howard. Lots of pieces there in that question. The reality is that we all know that what's best for our students is to have in-person instruction. And I think that the State Department of Public Health has gone to great lengths to create some scenarios that allow for that to happen and to try and create as much safety as possible. There's guidance that allows for small cohorts of students to return to campus. And we know that this is critically important for many of our students with disabilities. And many of our districts are giving this a try. There is this new color rating system that allows for districts to really track what's happening in the community in terms of rates of infection that have allowed many counties to open schools in their district or to be preparing to open in the weeks to come. I know many districts are planning to open schools sometime between now and December. Some districts are saying we're going to wait and say, we're eyeing January as a time to reopen and continuing distance learning. There is no one size fits all on this matter. Even in schools that have created hybrid openings, Some parents have said they prefer for their students to still be in distance learning. My heart goes out to those teachers who are really right now literally teaching a class with students in person and at the same time trying to track what's happening in their computer to support students in distance learning. You know, education wasn't intended to be this way. And we're asking a lot of educators and students, and I think we have to give thought to the best ways to get through these times. At the end of the day, I think safety has to be the top question of the day. And we have to take lessons from those communities that have had success. We've seen some success in reopenings and being able to prevent rates of infection. We've also seen some communities that have just flat out struggled, where schools have reopened and within short order, they've had to close. I think that we need to continue to ratchet up our work around COVID testing. And I know that the state is working on a new protocol to process more tests. The governor's office has announced some efforts there. I think we need to really get more innovation from our healthcare sector and from our biotech and research sector to help us think through how to have the appropriate level of testing that needs to occur to ensure safe reopening of schools. And we need to hear from our epidemiologists and others who can help us think through how we continue to make this work. I would just encourage Dan and others, I would encourage, and Howard, I would encourage schools to bottom line, think about safety in all of the ways that we approach reopening and serving students at this time. We know that distance learning creates benefits from the standpoint of safety. We know that it creates challenges from the standpoint that students aren't able to be connected with their educators and with their peers. That is irrefutable. And until all of our schools can reopen, I think we have to do more to figure out how to provide additional supports to our schools and our students. I was so impressed this week to spend time with our expanded learning leaders. These are the after-school programs. To talk, I've heard a lot from our childcare providers. They are finding ways to provide additional support. Sometimes it's at a rec center. Sometimes it's at a partnering agency. They're finding ways to get supports for our students. Some after-school activities have opened up. Of course, socially distanced. We have to look at every single option to find support for all of our students. And I know that our mental health partners and clinicians are doubling down on their efforts. We're asking them to double down. We've established a mental health coalition. I call it the Counseling Coalition. We're really working to try and build more support. Triage really is what I call it, that we can fill gaps for students who need help. What we envision is being able to shortly roll out a system where a person can call anywhere in the state and say, I need support, and be able to be connected to providers in their area. We want to also work with our schools on strengthening their family engagement programs so that families can have a direct connect to the school when they need more resources, they need more help, and they need support for students during this time. Nothing more important than social emotional learning right now. And we're working with the first partner, the state board president, Linda Darling-Hammond, and many others to look at how we can expand our social emotional learning programs to support our students.
Superintendent, we have a follow-up from Howard, and we do have a couple other reporters here, so just let me know how much time that we have. But one quick follow-up from Howard at the LA Times. It's about in-person services. He wants to know if you think districts should be providing in-person services for students who may have special needs or English learners within the cohort guidance that is provided by the state.
Thanks for the question. Obviously, right now, everyone's thinking about what's best for every student, and there is no one size fits all. And as it relates to serving students with disabilities, I think we should continue to be guided by what's in a student's IEP or their 504 plan. Let that be the guide of how we support our students. We should listen to parents and families. And if there are opportunities to provide in-person support, then we should do that. Obviously, that may not always be available. And again, we have to let the IEP and the 504 plan guide what we provide for our students. Here's what I would say. I think it's a mistake for any district to say we're going to blanket not provide any service to students with disabilities because of the unknown, because of the difficulty of doing it through remote learning. We know that it's difficult, but this is not the time to say that we're going to recoil or refrain from providing services that students need. If we have to find new ways to do assessments, then let's have that conversation. If we have to find new ways to support students, let's have that conversation. But again, districts and parents and families should avail themselves to the programs that have now been made available to allow small cohorts to return to campus so that some of our students who do absolutely need to have in-person support are able to get them. We have a lot of work to do. Let's lean in and continue to do that work together.
We have a follow-up question from related to school reopening from Marco Seiler Gonzalez at KQED News. And he asks that later today, the California Teachers Association plans to release a poll they say will show public school parents have ongoing concerns for the safety of students and educators. So as schools reopen, what are ways the state can ensure safety and health measures are undertaken by all schools?
Well, I haven't had a chance to review what's in the poll, but I look forward to hearing it. Anything that's going to help to keep our schools and families safer, I just think that's something we need to pay attention to. You know, we've seen examples of cities where schools have reopened and very much in short order have had to close. And so I think we need to learn. I think what we do know is that any school that's open should have lots of personal protective equipment. This year, we began the school year having worked with the governor's office to get 2 months worth of supply to all of our schools, all 10,000 of our schools. I think what we do know is that schools in other states who open without using face coverings and without maintaining social distancing and hand washing have seen challenges and have seen high rates of infection. Sadly, we are not out of the woods as it relates to the coronavirus, and it may be with us for until at least 2021. Some have even speculated that it could go beyond. We've got to continue to do the things that we know will help us to be safe. We can't control the coronavirus, but we can control the way we respond. And I know there's been a lot of pushback for saying that everyone should wear a face covering, but everyone should be wearing a face covering. With any time, we have to continue to maintain 6 feet of distance, and we have to continue hand washing, hand sanitizer. We provided much of this for our schools. My advice to the question about how to make these reopenings happen is to follow these guidelines to the T until we learn more about what we're dealing with the coronavirus, until there's a vaccine. Until these things, we have to continue to do the things that are proven and that we know can keep us safe and our students safe as it relates to the coronavirus impacts.
Right, thank you, Superintendent. I believe we have just one last question. This is from Louis Freeberg at EdSource. And it relates to, I think, some of your opening comments earlier about what trends we're seeing across the state. Do you have a sense, even roughly, of how many districts have reopened for in-person instructions, or how many students are currently being served in that format, given the vast majority of districts are now districts are no longer in Tier 1, the most restrictive tier?
Louis, I do not have access to that data at my fingertips, but we'll be happy to get you whatever data we have available. We are in touch with county superintendents and district superintendents to try and get situational awareness of that. There is not a central reporting function that allows that data to all funnel up, but we know it's important. And as we speak, we are connecting with associations to get as much information and awareness as we can about school reopenings. And stay tuned. As soon as we have it, we'll share it with you.
All right. And I'll hand it back over to you or any of our guests for any closing remarks. Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you. Let me start with Superintendent Sakuma. If you'd like to have any closing remarks, we'll go to Dr. Nemko, we'll go to Jessica Howard, and then we'll close out.
Thank you, Superintendent Thurmond. I'd just like to once again express my gratitude to you and to the whole team. And I would like to echo something that you said earlier, Superintendent Thurmond, which was expressing to the people of California and to the nation how important it is that we continue to pay attention to the social emotional needs of our students and providing the types of mental health supports that they'll need to get through these difficult times. Thank you, everyone, in advance for your generosity. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Superintendent Nemco?
Echo the thanks. We're working very hard on our safety protocols. We've been working on those for months. We anticipate having our largest school district reopen for hybrid in-person on October 26th. We've been set back a little bit with the other districts because of the fires, but we anticipate that they won't be far behind.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Howard?
Thank you, Superintendent. In what has been perhaps the hardest year of many lives, we have found so much incredible inspiration from the collaboration with you and your team, the many county offices of education and other school leaders. And just as schools provide a hub for resources and connection in their communities, we're asking you to help us do that on a state level through the entire system. Even if a school is gone or closed, we can help step in and make sure that they have the resources they need in those communities, whether they are in their own home still or displaced elsewhere. So please contribute to our GoFundMe. Again, you'll find the links in the chat and the comments. And whatever you can give will make a difference. There is a cost at every price point when we're considering circumstances like this. And we just ask you to help us as a state respond, just as your neighborhoods do as well.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Thank you all for joining our media check-in today. You know, I think it's fair to say our situation sometimes in this state and in this nation, in the world, is day by day. Circumstances change on a daily basis. We have to continue to track and monitor and adjust on a daily and sometimes weekly basis, and things change. And so we should do all that we can to support our schools as they're preparing to reopen and help them be as safe as they can be. We should do all that we can to address the social emotional needs of our students and continue to monitor that on a daily basis. What I don't think that we should ever do, and I know that there are many who have said that the impacts of distance learning outweigh the risk for the coronavirus. I do not think that this is a one or the other type of situation. I don't think any of this is mutually exclusive. I agree with Superintendent Sakuma that we need to think about the social emotional needs of our students. I agree with Superintendent Nemco that we've got to do all that we can to open. And I agree with students and families and educators and administrators and others who often say, let us still be careful. Let us not rush. And let us not just suggest that it's better to risk COVID infection because we're trying to offset social and emotional needs. Many Californians live with underlying health conditions, and being impacted by COVID can have deadly effects. And my heart breaks for those who've lost loved ones. We all know them. And so I think that we need to continue to do what we've been doing, shouldering together and monitoring on a day-by-day basis, making the best decisions that we have based on science and the information that we have as we go forward. Wherever you are in our state or in our nation, continue to be safe and well. Thank you for being with us today.